Hello, my name is Elena Bashaw, and this is my TED Talk. Okay, so the TED Talk I chose was The Heart of the Buddhist Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh, chapters 4 through 6. The basic background of the chapters that I read is that the chapters consisted of an understanding of Buddhist teaching, the aspect of suffering in Buddhism, and also the stopping, calming, resting, and healing meditation aspects of Buddhism. The summary of the course reading, I have how many points? 5 points. Okay, so the overall summary of the chapters 4 through 6 of the Buddhism reading was that the first point was that there are multiple schools of Buddhism that have many different, kind of the way that I understood it was that there were multiple, so there were three there were three schools of thought, and then those schools of thought, one of them was old school teachings. That was all the teachings that Buddha previously taught before he died. There was what is it called, Mahana, which is renewed teaching, so changes from previous original Buddhist teachings, but with a different perspective in a way. And that's kind of how the many schools of thought was as well, in conclusion with Mahana. And then point 2 was that many of the teachings or texts of Buddhism are distorted. This is due to the fact that a lot of it wasn't written down in general, and a story that was told was that there was one monk alive who knew word for word Buddhist teaching, but it was so arrogant in the fact that he remembered everything that he was reluctant to even write it down on palm leaves, and a bunch of different monks had to come and basically coerce him into writing everything down. And even when he did, it wasn't 100% accurate. So it was Buddha would, so for the main example I was thinking of was that when Buddha talked or discussed about how to suppress the mind, he talked about how it's not good to he was basically discussing how you grind your teeth, you put your tongue to your mouth, and you hold everything in, and that's a way that you don't want to go about suppressing your mind. And then that text was misinterpreted and used to prove the opposite point, that that's what you need to do in order to suppress your mind. So a lot of the teachings were kind of distorted or misused to support different evidence than it was originally told by Buddha. And kind of the interpretation I got was that in order to truly understand the teachings that Buddha originally taught, you have to read multiple discourses in order to truly understand the text. So reading different, so for example, there's so in the different schools of Buddhism, they have different portions of texts and different interpretations of those texts. So if I wanted to truly understand Buddhist teachings, I would go to the different schools of thought, and I would read different texts and see how they were interpreted, and see differences and similarities within the texts of the different schools of Buddhism, and see if I could connect them with one universal point. So then you can kind of figure out which teachings are kind of universal throughout the school, which proves that those were the original teachings of Buddha, or if they were the interpretations of Buddhist teaching by a given school that was skewed a certain way. So that was point 2 that I learned. Point 3 was about suffering, and it was about, like, the main part that I got from it was that it was also, like, suffering was also skewed in a way. So, for example, students of Buddhist teaching formed the 3 kinds of suffering, and Buddha didn't. So basically these 3 kinds of suffering is like kind of like anticipation. Sorry about that. Anticipation of suffering in life. But a quote that I really like that Buddha said about suffering was dwelling happily in things as they are. So it wasn't about like anticipating or like waiting for suffering. It's about like dwelling in the emotions you are currently dealing with and not anticipating other negative feelings to come, but just taking them as they are. And being able to recognize suffering, joy, impermanence, non-self, and nirvana was something that Buddha expressed as well. Like being able to recognize these instances or these themes that you see in your life that relate to suffering, joy, impermanence, non-self, and nirvana, and being able to like recognize them but not be 100% affected by them or not be in fear of those themes or anticipated of those themes. It was just being able to like recognize the feeling that you're facing in like a sense of your understanding your true self, and which comes into my 4th point, which talks about meditation within Buddhism. And it talked about that in order to like gain the truth of suffering, you need to use mindfulness, and like meditation really is a factor in understanding why humans do the habits why that individual does the habits they do, which in Buddhism are called like habit energies. And then there's 2 different types of meditation. It has 2 different aspects. So there's shamatha, which is stopping, or which like the definition of it is like stopping as to gain insight, and then vipassana. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these. I apologize. That is looking deeply within oneself, and it described that the need to do this is because of our habit energies. So in the beginning of the chapter, it described a story that a lot of Buddhist teachings talk about, which is a man on a horse. And this man on a horse, he's just going along this road, and this other guy on the side of the road says, "Where are you going?" And the guy says, "I don't know, ask my horse." As in, the symbolization behind that is that the horse is the habit energy, like just kind of like the horse is the habit energy in the way that like it is guiding you through life, and like you don't know where you're going, so it's like you're stuck in this cycle of like these behaviors that aren't necessarily positive to yourself. So the use of meditation is to like stop, take a second, like gain insight, and be able to like recognize your habit energies, and being able to, with that recognition, being able to like change your behavior. And it like further went on to discuss how like the preconditions of healing, as it was described. So it's like the steps of stopping and calming, or what it's officially known as shamatha, I think is what it is. And the 5 steps are recognition, acceptance, embracing, looking deeply, and insight. So these are the steps that were given in the chapters to as like kind of like a handbook on how to meditate in general, but you can't reach that meditative state until you gain enough like insight and knowledge on yourself. So that's why they have the knowledge and insight and the recognition, acceptance, and embracing in the first 3 steps, because that's what you need in order to be able to gain insight and look deeply into oneself. Questions I had for the class, or just video in general, I guess now, is that question 1 is, do you ever feel like the man and the horse from the Buddha's story / teaching? And what ways do you combat your habit energies? So like, do you, like, are there instances in your life where like you feel like your habit energies are like kind of just like pushing you along, like you have no, like you have no choice, or you feel like you don't have a choice in changing behaviors due to this habit energies that are occurring, and what ways do you combat that? And then question 2 is, do you see a connection between meditation and confession, or the collection of Buddhist teaching in the Gospels? If you do, please elaborate. If not, explain as well. The reason I asked this question is because like as I was reading, I just kind of like being in this class, I've just like learned about like multiple different religions. So like when I read about like a new religion, I kind of like relate it to others that I've learned, to see like if I can find any connections between them, even if they aren't similar religions. So that's kind of why I asked that. So meditation to Buddhism is kind of like related to me as like confession, as in like in Christianity, because like in a sense, like with confession, you are letting go and you're like accepting your sins and gaining insight from them, which is why you're coming to confession, which is, I mean, kind of similar to meditation in the Buddhism's teaching, because you stop and you take a moment, you evaluate your life, and then you accept your actions that you've taken in your life, and you look deeply within yourself and you gain insight. And then, you know, with the collection of Buddhist teaching, and the Gospels, I just saw a connection there, because Buddhist teaching, like a lot of the texts are a collection from like students or like people who followed him along in faith, such as like the Gospels did with Jesus, and, you know, wrote in the Bible as well. So I just saw that connection, and I just didn't know if anybody else did. And yeah, that is my TED Talk. Thank you so much.